It's hard to believe we're already at the halfway mark of 2025. This year has been both an eternity and a blink in the eye. I am every time I'm like, "Oh wait, we're into July now." I'm like, "Nope, there's no way. We're still in January or we are like several years ahead of where we need to be right now." Ah, but that all being said, we have had some incredible and groundbreaking records within the first half of 2025 that I figured, you know what? I'm just going to take a moment to reflect. I'm going to take a moment, see what came out. I've got 20 records to talk about because I couldn't limit it to 10. And to show no favoritism, this isn't a ranking record album review thing. This isn't the top 10 or the top 20 or the top 50 that I do at the end of the year. These are 20 records that really I've come back to on a regular basis because I have really enjoyed them and I can't get enough of them. So most of these I've done full-length album reviews for. Some of them I haven't, and I just want to take a moment to celebrate these records. So without further ado, let's dive into the 25 records. I know I said 20 before, but I've already realized I've got a lot more to talk about. The 25 records that I have absolutely adored and loved within the first half of 2025. All right, we're going alphabetically by artist. Again, not to show any favoritism, not to show any kind of revealing my cards of what's going to be in my top 10 within the end of the year. But first off, I got to give it, you know what? I'm going to move a little bit over here. There we go. Just a little bit, just a hair, so that you can see the album behind me. First off, Deafheaven with their album Lonely People with Power. Talk about a return to form and return to what really works without being a complete derivative of the past. I still love Infinite Granite, and Ordinary Corrupt Human Love is still my favorite record from Deafheaven. But what they've done with this one is create the most solid record from start to finish. They kind of went right back to Sunbather within this one, and it really captures the power, the aggression, the unstoppable force that Deafheaven have, and the blending of the shoegaze and the black metal to really create that black gaze moments. Absolute triumph. And if you haven't already listened to it, I can't recommend this one enough. All right, moving on. Again, these are just going to be bite-sized snippets. I'm not going to do a full-length album review. As I said, most of these albums I've already reviewed on my channel. Let's get into Dream Theater and their album of Parasomnia. I have listened to this record more often than I thought I was going to. This brought me back to when a new Dream Theater record would drop and I would be obsessed with it. I haven't been obsessed with a Dream Theater record probably since the dramatic turn of events. It has got me excited to be a Dream Theater fan, and it's also gotten me excited to hear what they have coming up next. Because after The Astonishing and Distance Over Time and View from the Top of the World, I was just kind of like, okay, I'll check it out, but I'm not going to super look forward to it. Now I'm legit looking forward to whatever they have coming up next. It had this new energy about it, Mike Portnoy being back in the band, and I couldn't help but just gush about the music that I was hearing. Sure, it might still be a little bit derivative of what we've gotten within the past, but there was enough originality on this one that really sparked that creative fire that I know that Dream Theater is able to command. So, yeah, couldn't help but love this one. Let's talk about Eden Song with their album The Road to Dust, or Our Road to Dust. Man, talk about a album that did not sit still. I found myself coming back to this one. It was aggressive, it was proggy, it was rockin'. I just found myself enjoying every time I would listen to it because I knew that the shakeups of this record would always surprise me. Even though I had practically memorized these tracks, where these tracks went were always so exciting and always so fun. So yeah, I had to continuously listen to Eden Song. We're going to Ethel Cain with Perverts. This is a intense listen. It's a very long listen too, at an hour and a half, but it's so atmospheric, it's so intense, and if you're a fan of Ethel Cain, you really need to check this one out. This is kind of in the same vein as the Swans experimental soundscapes, but there are moments of clarity that I feel like Swans doesn't quite have. I still love Swans, and I'm still going to talk about their latest album, but I feel like Perverts really does have that humanistic touch to this experiment of life. You know, it's so intense, it's so gritty, it's so in your face that I can't help but love and praise. So, yeah, if you're a fan of experimental music, if you're a fan of experimental pop, you owe it to yourself to at least give this one a listen, because those moments of clarity justify those moments of experimental soundscapes. And this is the style of music that I really, really love, and I will celebrate anytime somebody does it. So, absolutely have a listen to that one. SM with Aloabar. I'm not going to say the entire album out. If I had a front runner for album of the year, it would be this one. It really would be. This one is hard to shake in terms of what I appreciate and what I look forward to within music overall. You know, not just progressive rock or progressive metal, just music overall. They have changed the game. They're trying new things. There are things on this album that I had never heard before. The build-ups, the payoff, the virtuosity, their technical prowess, you know, their ability to command a song, the memorable moments, the absolute chaos that's found on this. You know, everything is in French, but I still get the gist of what's going on. I can't talk highly more about this album. If you haven't listened to it already and you love the music that I cover on this channel, you owe it to yourself to go and listen to this one. As I said, this one is the front runner for album of the year so far, and it's been very, very hard to shake. There's only like one other album that kind of comes close to knocking at the door. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, if you're looking for experimental, extreme, progressive metal, you're not going to get better than this. All right, we're coming to the first album that I have not reviewed yet. I do plan on giving a full-length album review for this one, and that is Flumx with their album of Southern Progress. I have not encountered an album thus far this year, or even really within the past couple of decades, that I have not felt so seen in. You know, just that first couple of opening lines off of this record, man, immediately I'm like, I need to get my lawyers contacted because they have been watching me. You know, like they are extremely astute in getting to the heart of what it is to be me at this point. The only downside that I have is that it does feel a little bit on the long side, just with how chaotic and how uncontrolled it is, you know, and I know that's part of the appeal. You know, that's what they're talking about within this record, but looking at the difference between, say, an SM and a Flumx, I feel like the Flumx is the unpolished version, where they're throwing a lot on the wall without really doing too much refining, you know, without doing too much, you know, shifting the raw ore to the actual gems and jewels that are found on here. But that being said, this album still knocked me off my feet. I kept coming back to this record, and again, there's so much of me on this record that I was just like, oh boy, I'm feeling real seen. Part of it's uncomfortable, but most of it is just like really, really getting to the heart and soul of it. So, been absolutely loving this one. All right, let's talk about Ghost with their album Skeleton. Still not necessarily their best, but definitely worlds and streets ahead of their last record of Imperia. I've been loving this one. I've been listening to this one a lot this year. It honestly has one of my favorite Ghost songs ever found on this one. The grooves and the vibes are real on this record, and yeah, it's so infectious and so fun. Sure, we have traded the gothic satanism for glam and stadium rock and metal, but I'm okay with that. You know, I've made peace with that. We're not going to get another Meliora. We're not going to get another, you know, debut record from them, but we are going to get some fantastic, really loud, very fun tracks, you know, and I'm here along for the ride. So yeah, really good, really fun on that one. All right, let's talk about Great Wide Nothing with their album A Shout Into the Void. Man, this was another late stage album for me within the halftime. Love this one. Absolutely love this one. Blending of the aggressive punk mentality with the progressive rock expression. If any other band was attempting to do this, I would have kind of written them off, but knowing that this was the Great Wide Nothing doing it, I knew we were in good hands. They've already proven to be masters of the progressive rock and the retro style of the progressive rock, that I was okay with them going into this new direction, and man, it paid off in spades. So yeah, I loved how aggressive it was. I loved how antagonistic this album was, but overall, how hopeful at the end of the day this record was. And that's what really brought me to this record. And I can't gush more about this record. You know, this is a forerunner of the top 5 records of the year. And yeah, I have to recommend it. So go and check that one out. All right, next up, we've got IQ with their record of Dominion. This one surprised me. You know, this one surprised me a little bit, especially after the 1-2 punch that I wasn't all that excited with. I felt like we were getting a lot of same with IQ, you know, and these are one of my favorite neo-progressive rock bands. You know, like these were the bands that I had endless praise for. And I just felt lately we've been only getting okay output from them. And I wouldn't necessarily say we're back in the glory days of, say, Ever or Dark Matter or Subterranea or Frequency or The Seventh House, you know, their main staple records. But we are getting some really top shelf tracks off of this one. And I know that they've got more juice in the tank for a follow-up record, and I'm almost more excited of that. You know, it's the promise of more that I'm more excited for. So, yeah, I had a great time with that one, and I can't wait to see what else IQ has in store. This brings us to the other frontrunner for Album of the Year. We've got Jacob Roberge with The Remembering, and only now am I realizing that it is alphabeticalized by first name rather than last name, but hey, too late now to change things. Jacob Roberge with The Remembering, French-Canadian virtuoso. Yeah, this is like, if FM has number 1 spot almost slotted, this very easily has number 2. The title track alone, I think we'll be talking about in like 10 to 20 years time. The Remembering is an all-timer. That track of The Remembering is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. I very comfortably will put that on the shelf in the same way that Devil in Your Soul, Supper's Ready, all those big epics of progressive rock. Very easily, I'll put that on the shelf with those. This was the album I was begging Neil Morse to put out within the past decade, and we've only really gotten flavors of. Yeah, this is progressive rock at its finest. The only drawback, and it's only just a little bit of a nitpick, is I feel like the first half of this record is a little too ballad heavy for my taste. I almost wish that we had just a little bit of a mini epic in here, but you know, this is me nitpicking and really looking for, you know, when I'm talking about the best, I have to weed out by something. Yeah, that's that. I've been loving this record, and honestly, I do feel as if Jacob Roberge has raised the expectation level. You know, this is the album that I am essentially grading all other retro prog albums, and nothing else has gotten close. So, yeah, if you haven't already checked out The Remembering by Jacob Roberge, highly recommend doing so. All right, let's get a little snappy here. I'm talking a lot about these records. You know, coming at the 10th spot, Japanese Breakfast for Melancholy Brunettes and Sad Women. Last year was the year of pop, and it's still bleeding into this year. And man, I really love Japanese Breakfast with their past couple of records. I don't know if this one's quite as strong as some of those, but it does hold some of my favorite moments from them. If you're looking for more of like a dream pop, synth pop, that kind of a flavor, you don't get better than Japanese Breakfast. I've really been digging into this one, and I've been having a great time with it. I'm going to leave it there because we still have a lot of records to talk about. Let's talk about, you know, switch gears entirely. Let's go over to Kell L with their album of Astral Voyager Volume 1. I don't know if Volume 2 is going to be coming out this year or next year, but I'm really stoked to hear that other one. You know, this is the sludgy, psychedelic, space, stoner, metal, rock outfit of Kell L. I've really loved all their outputs up to this point. I think that this is their strongest work to date. Part of that is because of how short and punchy it is, being a part 1, being only half the story. But part of it is also because it is so short, they kind of had to make sure that everything that's on it is the cream of the crop. And it really is. There's all bangers, no fillers on this record, and I have been really loving it from start to finish. All right, let's go back to pop. This is another one that was very lo-fi, very vibes, and that is with Kali Uchis with Sincerely. I've been loving this record. You know, it's just so heartwarming. It's so chill. It's so vibes. I've been coming back to this when I just need some really chill vibes, and I can't help but love it. If you are a fan of more of a almost like R&B, a little bit more of a smooth ride within your pop music, I think you're really going to enjoy this one, as I've did on this one. So yeah, Kell L, just really love that one. All right, let's flip the table entirely. Let's go to Carfagan with Omni. Yeah, this might be my favorite album from Omni, and I always felt like Carfagan with Anthony Collusion is the prog version of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, where, he puts out 2 to 3 albums every year, either through his, Anthony Collusion, or through his Carfagan, or his other projects that he's been, playing with. The man is nonstop. He's always innovative. He's always creative. And I feel like Omni is one of his best works to date. It's a single track playthrough album that I absolutely love. The concept itself is just so beautiful. And yeah, I was astounded thinking that maybe Anthony is just, running on empty. He's kind of, all the juice is squeezed. But nah, this proves that there's a lot of juice still left in him. And he's proving that the cream of the crop is still very much attainable. So love that one. And talking about King Giz, let's talk about King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard with their album Phantom Island. Once again, we're like everything that I just said about Anthony Collusion and Carfagan, right onto this album. I love that this one has the full brass section and violins played within it. It showcases that they're able to utilize the different genres that they're playing in. They're taking the strengths of those genres and making it their own without taking any of the flaws. I love how grand this record sounds. It's playing in that style of King Giz that I absolutely adore and I absolutely love. And I can't help but, sing the praise of this one. I had to get it in physical format, even though my King Giz, area within my discography is getting huge. I still had to own this one. So yeah, love this one. All right, let's talk about another forerunner of, maybe even the top 5 of albums of the year. Let's talk about Lars Fredrik Froseli with Gamblemeister. Love this one. And I've always kind of been on the fence with Lars and his band of Wobbler. I know a lot of people love that, and I just felt like it was derivative of the influences. They weren't bringing a whole lot of new flavors to the table. They were just kind of treading water, but this was one of the first ones from Lars and the team of Wobbler that really stood out for me and was doing something that I really love. They were championing the sounds of the past, and Lars being the keyboardist, not just emulating and not just being a derivative of his sources. Yes, I can hear Keith Emerson on it. I can hear Rick Wakeman on it. I can hear Tony Banks on it, but he was using the strengths and using that as a jumping off point rather than a crutch. And I've been loving this one. This is the first record from Lars or Wobbler that I've picked up in physical format because of the uniqueness that's found on this one. And I really hope that this is a trend that we'll see going forward within Lars and Wobbler's rest of their career. All right, let's talk about Lucy Darcus with her album Forever is a Feeling. I came to Lucy almost backwards to most people, because I saw this record, I gave it a spin, and I absolutely loved it, and I was like, what else has she done? And then found Boy Genius, where most people found Boy Genius and then decided to go back and listen to, the individual members of that group. I've been loving this one. I love how, genuine this record is. I love how singer-songwriter it is without it being too melodramatic. I love how emotional this record is. It really is that feminine singer-songwriter that I love within my pop music. It's very vibes, it's very chill, but it still packs a punch within the lyrics and within the content. So yeah, if you're a fan of, that kind of style and expression, I really think you should give this one a listen to. All right, let's go back into Prague with Magic Pie and Maestro. This one is the forerunner for most surprising record of the year so far. I always said that Magic Pie's records were always a little bit on the spotty side. Some were better than others. They would have moments that I really loved, but as an album overall, they've just kind of been meh. Maestro is the first one that is solid from start to finish. I love this style of symphonic retro prog. I wouldn't necessarily say it's as good as The Suffering Joy, the track, but I would say that it's better than The Suffering Joy, the album. I still think The Suffering Joy is their masterpiece, but man, this is a crowning jewel. I would say that this is their best record from start to finish, and if you're a fan of the retro symphonic prog, you owe it to yourself to listen to this one. So, been loving this one, and go and check it out. All right, let's go back to pop with Marina and Princess of Power. If there had been an album that I had listened to the most this year, it would probably be this one. I recognize that this is a flawed masterpiece. This one isn't perfect, but man, with the title track and I Love You and so many powerhouse tracks, this is the style of pop that I love. I see myself in this music, I recognize myself, and I love just gushing out the powerhouse that's found in this one. This is the style of music that's like, we embrace the cringe because we recognize that we are cringe, and if we didn't, we would be lying to ourselves, and we just want to celebrate who we are. And this album does that in full force. I don't know if I'm going to put out a full-length album review for this one, because I do recognize that this is a power pop record full force, and I don't think my audience is here for that one, but I am here for it 100%, and it has been, if I'm talking about my most enjoyed records, this one's top tier. If you look at my top 3 records of the year, you've got FM, you've got Jacob Reverge, and then you've got Marina. It's like, what? One of these things isn't quite here. It's like that 3-headed Hydra, where 2 of them are very, very, serious and stoic, and one is just, complete, hey, what am I doing here, guys? But I guess you can say the same about all 3, really, it's weird. It's weird. Anyway, that's what I've got for Marina. Go and check it out, but also recognize that maybe this one isn't for you. One that should be for you is Moonletters and their record, This Dark Earth. Been loving this one. I love Moonletters. I love how commanding they are. I love how scrappy and how young and how hungry they are. And this continues the trend of Thank You from the Future. I don't know if it's quite as strong from beginning to end of that one, but I still love this one. It's that retro prog that I love, and much like Great Wide Nothing, I think we are in good hands in the future of progressive rock with these very hungry, very powerful, and commanding voices within this landscape. All right, let's switch gears entirely. Let's talk about Samantha Fish. I don't think I've covered her yet on my channel. She is a blues guitarist that I have fallen in love with. Her latest record, A Paper Dolls, is just brilliant. The track Southern Sound, I cannot stop listening to. If I had a single track off of this year that I think would win track of the year, it'd be Southern Sound. I love how commanding she is. I love how intense and driven this is. And, I love tracks that are doing something different. So, if you like a more rock style of blues, I think you're really going to love this one, and I highly, highly recommend it. All right, let's talk about the big heavy hitter of this year so far, Steven Wilson with The Overview. This one I have come to appreciate and I've come to love, and most of it was due to getting it in physical format. I did a full-length album review about this, of the bait and switch of, again, this is why it's so important for the structure of an album and the formatting of an album. And it can make or break it. When I listened to it on the digital download that I got and of streaming sites of, the disc 2 where it's all chopped up, it made for a very disjointed and very unpleasant listen. But when I listen to the streaming site of it in the 2 tracks, or I listen to it on record, man, it's a whole other world. The music might still be the same, but it just feels so much more punchy, and it feels so much more immediate, and the flow of it is so much better because it builds off everything, and I can't help but love it. So really love that one, and I'm really excited to see what Steven's got under his belt next. All right, let's talk about something really strange, really avant-garde, very heavy and intense. We're talking about Tempora Manturta with their album of Lunar. Love expressions like this. I love the experimental metal scene, and this one has it in spades. I actually picked this one up in cassette tape, and I feel like that's the best way to listen to this record. It's grimy, it's gritty, without it being sounding like it's being mixed through mud. And when I come to a grimy and gritty album, I want to make sure that the mix sounds good. and this album has a good mix to it. If you love that more aggressive, more challenging music, you got to give this one a spin. I think you'll really enjoy it. Got to talk about Titalica with that album of Gods of Pangea. Charlie Griffith from Haken once again proves that he can stand on his own 2 feet, and his Titalica project is one of my most excitable projects that I've heard within the prog sphere lately. This one is more straightforward 80s metal than the first album of his was, the debut, now self-titled album. I've been loving this one. You know, like, I will admit it's not quite as good or to my taste as the first record, but that doesn't disqualify this one as being a great record. You know, when I want that straightforward metal, I'm coming to this record, baby. Like, I cannot help but love this record, and it's one that I've come back to quite regularly when I just want a straightforward metal record. You can't get better than this. All right, rounding this all off, let's talk about Victoria Canal with Slowly It Dawns. Man, I've been loving this one. Again, it's another pop record that I've really loved. It's vibes, it's cool, it's crisp, it's, you know, it's that sorbet, it's the palate cleanser after listening to a lot of my more intense music. You know, I love metal, I love prog, but a lot of the times it can get pretty intense. You know, it's very technical, very in your face, and when I want something with just a little bit more of a chill down vibes record, Victoria has me covered, you know, and I've been enjoying this one. It's super chill, it's super vibes, and if you're a fan of that kind of music, highly recommend checking that one out. So yeah, that's all 25 records of my favorites of the year thus far. We'll see where things land at the end of the year. We'll see how many of these land on, say, my top 10 or even my top 50. You know, if the second half of 2025 is as good as the first half, man, we're in for a treat. We're really in for a treat because we've got some really standout albums on the horizon, both in big name and in small name. In big name, we've got Between the Buried and Me, we've got Arjun Lucassen, we've got Lorna Shore, we've got The World is a Beautiful Place and I'm No Longer Afraid to Die, we've got Sabrina Carpenter, which I'm super stoked for. But we also have some smaller acts that I really love and I love championing, like Trope. I know we've got a full thing from Ethel Cain coming on. We've got another one from Wield and Woe. We've got a Canadian darling of Sloan coming out with an album that I haven't heard anything new from Sloan for the longest time. So super stoked for all that. I want to know 2 things from you guys. First off, what are some of the albums from the first half of 2025 that you guys have loved? Which ones have you been grooving to? Which ones are in your forerunner for album of the year? And secondly, what are the albums from the second half that you are so stoked for? Which are the ones that you're literally counting down the days until they release something new? Let me know all about that, again, by commenting down below. If you've loved this video, or if you've even just liked this video, be sure to let me know by clicking that like button. Let me know by commenting, and if you have liked what I've done for the first half of 2025, or my tenure here on YouTube, consider joining. You know, I've got that member link down below, or I've got my Patreon. Either way, you know, and I also understand these are tough times. Do what you can. But, you know, it's always there if you want to give back. So, yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I've spoken a lot about the albums that I've loved. Anyway, I'm going to stop there before I get too emotional. I want to thank you all, though, for watching. Again, at the end of the day, I do it for you guys. And even if nobody was watching, I'd still do it. But it really does warm my heart. I recently just passed 18,000 subscribers, and it means so much to me. My next big milestone now is 20, and I'm really hoping to get it to the end of the year with a 20. I don't think I'll be able to do it, but I can hope. So yeah, share this around, share me around, and let's get me to 20 grand by the end of the year. So that's where I'm at. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, y'all are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.